With President Trump securing an agreement with CCP leader Xi Jinping, some China observers say the regime can't be trusted and that the deal is just a delay tactic. Joining me now to assess these developments, I had a chance to sit down with Robert Destro, former Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. Robert Destro, thanks so much for sitting down with us.
Well, thanks for having me.
Great to have you back with us. Obviously, you committed to the Foreign Service and served the country. President Trump just wrapped up a very high-stakes meeting with the leader of China, Xi Jinping. Now, historically, in these very high-profile settings, the United States has typically avoided, for the most part, confronting the Chinese Communist Party over its human rights abuses. Occasionally, it might be brought up on the periphery, but nothing ever direct and forceful. That's despite, being more or less one of our core values. Why do you think that is?
Well, because it's perceived by many people, including people inside the State Department, as nagging. And the result is that you get this kind of functional separation between, a big trade deal about critical minerals and the human rights issue is viewed as an add-on. Kind of almost like, if you can get that, that's the cherry on top of the whipped cream. That's not the way it ought to be. Human rights ought to be baked into the trade deal, and we can talk about that. Most of my time as Assistant Secretary was spent on supply chain issues. So it's a big part of the human rights portfolio.
Which includes slave labor.
Slave labor, yes. Slave labor was the biggest one, but predatory pricing so that you're leaving people out. The Chinese government sending work crews to go to Africa to mine cobalt using kids. I mean, this is, you can see a lot in the labor context that you wouldn't see in kind of the free speech context.
What might it look like to bring up human rights at the negotiating table? We have heard stories before of the issue of Falun Gong being brought up in front of Chinese officials, and they get up and walk out of the room. It's a third rail.
Well, it is, but that's because it's perceived as the third rail. It doesn't need to be the third rail. And my point would be, if I were to walk around the halls of the State Department today and say, hey, let's build some human rights provisions into a critical minerals deal. You can't use kids, right? You can't use slave labor. That can all be written into the contract, and then that becomes a part of the negotiation. But if you just raise it and say, oh, and by the way, you guys are persecuting the Falun Gong, to which they could logically say, what does that have to do with cobalt?
Mm-hmm. Now, how could bringing up human rights align with our national interests, and not just from a moral standpoint, but also from a diplomatic one as well?
Well, let's pick slave labor, right? And so we need critical minerals. That was a lot of what that discussion was about. China made it really clear that they were going to control the table. The United States couldn't have that, nor could the rest of the world. Right? We all need that. And so what China was doing is behaving as a typical monopolist, controlling the supply. And so when you say, well, what about, how does free trade fit into it? How does human rights fit in? It's because you inject it right into because they can charge lower prices if they're using slave labor. If we're paying union labor in this country, the disparity is there. So there's a couple of ways you can deal with it. You can impose a tariff to offset the difference in the cost. You can impose a sanction, which they're going to refuse to pay. Or you can build it into the agreement saying, we're going to impose unless you take care of your workers, we're going to build it into the price. So there's there are lots of ways to skin that cat.
There's a lot of folks out there, I guess they're called China hawks, people that watch China closely and are very critical of the Chinese Communist Party. Coming out of the meeting in Korea, a lot of folks in that category are saying that this is just delay tactics, they're not as optimistic and that the CCP can't be trusted. What do you say to that?
Well, there's a number of questions in there. So let's start with the last one. Can you trust the CCP? And the answer is no, you can't. I mean, remember, these are people who, if there was a genetic match, would sell your liver. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. And they are aggressively communist, right? That means there's no such thing as private property. But the fact of the matter is, you can deal with them. You just have to deal with them with our eyes open. And what we want to know is, did they deliver? That's the old Ronald Reagan trust but verify.
It's a very powerful statement that you just made. Are you confident that the majority of our high-ranking officials that are dealing with them understand the CCP at that level, that these are brutal murderers?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I also think that American companies, are trying to protect their investments over there. And when you get them in private and say, what part of communist didn't you get? I mean, how many $1 billion did you put in there? Did you actually think you were going to get it back? You can write it off. Make money while you can, but they will steal your ideas. They'll steal your intellectual. They've been doing it for years. Why are they going to change?
Robert Destro, former Assistant Secretary for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor. Greatly appreciate you joining us.
Thanks.